While the war rages with the Gaza Strip, activists in Israel denouncing the displacement of hundreds of Palestinian Bedouins in the West Bank. Israel's army accused of abetting armed and hooded Jewish settlers intent on taking their land. For more, let's cross to Ori Givati, Advocacy Director of the Breaking the Silence Advocacy Group. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
There's been reports, most specifically about one incident on October the 12th, where hundreds of Bedouins were forced off their land.
Look, first of all, before I start talking about this issue, it's very important for me to say that we're not in usual times. I've been an activist about this issue for more than 7 years, and it's the most difficult time I remember. And from here, I will also call for the release of all hostages, many of them friends and family members of our group Breaking the Silence. And we have to speak about everything from that perspective of the war that's been going on in Gaza. And now to your question. Look, the incident you mentioned on the 12th of October is one of many. But what we're seeing today in the West Bank is a situation where the settlers are exploiting the fact that we are at war, that our country is at war, that all eyes are on Gaza, in order to proceed with their messianic goals very violently. This is not a new phenomena, but the extent of this phenomena has grown much, much larger since the beginning of the war. Just to give you a number, in the year before the war, settlers using settler violence managed to evict 7 Palestinian communities from their lands, which is terrible. But from the war, since the war, already more than 8 communities. Yeah. So that's just to understand how bad the situation is in terms of Palestinian communities that have to leave their land, their sometimes decades, sometimes more than decades before the establishment of Israel, land that they were living in, as a result of the violence of the settlers.
And this is the West Bank, and we saw that report before we spoke to you, is where many feared that we'd have some kind of a major eruption before October the 7th, not the Gaza Strip. Your organization points to 2017 as this moment where these settlers started going really on the offensive. What happened then? Why?
Look, I think that when we look on settler violence and the way it's been growing, we need to start way earlier than 2017. We need to start from the day of the occupation. The second that we decided as a country to move our citizens into the occupied area, in that minute, settler violence happened. And it's been growing ever since. And in recent years, it's been growing more and more. And the reason for that is, first of all, very simple. When you allow someone to act violently and there is no law enforcement against them, and they are basically allowed to do what they want, there is no reason for them to do it less, right? When there is an opening to do it more, when it's an opening for the settler movement to fulfill its goals, which we have to understand and say very clearly. The goal is to push Palestinians away from their homes in Area C. That's the first step, Area C is 61% of the West Bank, and it's where all the settlements are, and also 300,000 Palestinians, which are mainly in rural villages, So these are the first targets for the settler movement. And before we even speak about the violence itself, we have to talk about the fact that we have over 120 settler outposts. Outposts are settlements that are illegal, not only in international law, but also in Israeli law. And we are also not enforcing the law against these outposts, against the settlers that live in these outposts. So when we allow generally the settlers to start breaking the law, very, very quickly, it escalates to violence. And what we're seeing in recent years is the culmination of this with insane incidents, really insane. Like, I'm sure before this war, many of the viewers heard about the incident in Hawara where settlers basically burned a village. Yeah, and also one of the Palestinians was murdered. And that was maybe a peak, but there is settler violence every day. Before the war, yeah, I'm talking now before the war, the average was almost 3 times settler violence incident per day. Yeah, and this is before the war. Since the war, we're talking about crazy numbers. I don't know, we don't have the data yet, but from what we're hearing from our partners, Palestinian partners, activists, organizations, the numbers are really unimaginable. And almost every day there is a Palestinian community that decides to leave their homes because no one is protecting them.
And just on this point, just to remind our viewers, these Bedouin communities, they're farmers, they're herders, and they too were victims on October the 7th.
Yeah, so look, it's a bit more complicated than that, because the Palestinians that were, the Bedouins that were victims in October 7th are within the Green Line. The Palestinians we're talking about right now are in the West Bank, yeah? So there is a connection, but it's not the same exact communities. Yeah? It's important to remember that. But if I continue, the last point, which I think is very important to say to the viewers, is that according to international law and according also to basic principles, we have to remember that the occupying power today in the West Bank is our army, the army that I served in not that long ago, and the army that our testifiers and our members serve in until today. And according to that, the army is supposed to protect everyone in the area. Yeah? What we have been seeing throughout the years is a process that is now in its peak, that instead of protecting everyone in the area, meaning the settlers, but also the Palestinians, we're seeing a situation today that we as soldiers are sent to protect settlers that attack Palestinians. And this is the culmination of a process that started a long time ago, and basically is a policy. Yeah, and that policy allows the settlers and gives them state backing for the violent actions that they're taking part in. And that is something that is the core issue of this problem, because also in France and anywhere else, there are people who are violent and are trying to do terrible things to other people. Mm-hmm. But in most places, most functioning places, the police will stop them. But here, the police, which is in the West Bank, is the military, is protecting the violence.
Ori Givati, one quick final question. For too long, the international community forgot about the Middle East. Now we're all paying attention. Does that mean that those people have hope that in the future there will be pressure to protect them?
I think that what we're seeing now must remind everyone that we cannot continue with this concept of managing the conflict, meaning it goes on, Israel occupies, and there is some violence, but it's not that bad. Yeah, what we saw in October 7th is one of the things we saw is that we cannot go on like this. We cannot. And it's true for Palestinian communities in the West Bank. It's true for Israelis around Gaza. It's true for Palestinians in Gaza. It's true for all of us from the river to the sea. That's what we have to understand. And the international community has to understand, and I'm saying it as an Israeli, that it has a role here, and it needs to help us Israelis to end this, because it's not good for anyone in this area.
Ori Givati, many thanks for speaking with us on France 24.
Thank you very much.